Hare Krishna. We welcome all of you to today's session. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudírayet nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke Bhaktir bhavati naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya cha Nandagopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Nama Pankajanabhaya Nama Pankajamaline Nama Pankajanetraya Namaste Pankajangraye Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Aradhya Bhagavan Vrajesh Tanayas Tadhama Vrindavanam Ramya Kachidupasana Vrajavadhu Vargena Vakalpita Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanam Amalam Prema Pumartho Mahan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhur Matamidam Tatra dharana paraha Om ajnanatimirandhasya jnananjana shalakaya Chakshurun militam yena tasmai Shri Gurave namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Radhanatha Swami Niti Namine Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Jayapataka Swami Niti Namine Namo Acharya Padaya Nitai Kripa Pradayine Gaurakatha Dhamadaya Nagaragramatadine Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham karoti vachalam pangurlangayate girim Yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurum dinatarinam Paramananda madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. We welcome all of our Facebook Live listeners and our listeners over YouTube Live who will be listening to this session later on. So again, we beg for forgiveness that we are not able to go live on YouTube yet. Hopefully by next week, the problem that we are, technical issues that we are having will be resolved by Krishna's mercy. So today we would like to continue on with the Uddhava Gita. We will do chapters 10 and 11 from the 11th Canto of Srimad Bhagavatam in continuation of the Uddhava Gita. So in yesterday's session, Prabhu actually had started off with the Uddhava Gita. We see that from chapter 7 through chapter 29, present the conversation that are happening between Krishna and Uddhava, which is very famously known as Uddhava Gita. So in chapters 23, in like 23 chapters basically, from chapter 7 to chapter 29. So in 23 chapters, Krishna is explaining Uddhava the knowledge which he must, distribute to others. So Bhagavad Gita, we all know, has 18 chapters. And here Uddhava Gita, we see that it has 23 chapters. So, let us first try to understand, is there any kind of difference between Uddhava Gita and the Bhagavad Gita? So we were just trying to do some research on this, and we found that, of course, we all know that Bhagavad Gita has 700 verses, which is distributed in 18 chapters, and Uddhava Gita, which is distributed over 23 chapters, is having 1030, means 1030 verses. So Bhagavad Gita is basically talking about karma pradhana, like it is basically, karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana, how we are not this body, we are spirit, soul, and therefore, the ultimate, process of yoga is bhakti yoga. That also Krishna has said. And ultimately, the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita is to tell Arjuna that you must engage in your prescribed duty. So it is karma pradhana. But it is talking about bhakti, devotional service, while being engaged in karma yoga basically. So it is dedicated to duty and to responsibility. What is the responsibility of a human being? What is the different responsibilities in different, spheres of life? So in that sense, Krishna's final instructions in the Gita, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja, aham tvam sarva papebhya mokshashami masuchaha. So these are the basic teachings of the Gita, so which is, broadly categorized to be karma pradhan. While Uddhava Gita, it is said that it is bhakti pradhan. It stresses on the Bhagavad Dharma, and it stresses more. Everything is in connection. We'll see that, we are talking about the soul and the body. Krishna also tells Uddhava about the soul and the body. He talks about different yoga processes also. But it is, like if you read the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, especially as it is, then we see that, Prabhupada has made us understand the Bhagavad Gita through the light of Bhakti Yoga. But in the Uddhava Gita, Krishna directly stresses on bhakti, just bhakti pradhan. It is just talking about devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it is dedicated to Bhagavad Dharma. So Bhagavad Gita is known as the Song of God. Bhagavad Gita literally means the Song of God, whereas Uddhava Gita is basically like a farewell message that Krishna gives, as it is almost like a parting discourse, that Krishna is giving on the eve of his disappearance. But to understand the Uddhava Gita properly, a person must have thoroughly studied the Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is. Only if we understand the Bhagavad Gita properly, then we will be able to understand the Uddhava Gita properly. So Bhagavad Gita, we all know it is a conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. And here, Uddhava Gita is a conversation between Uddhava and Krishna. So the speaker is Krishna. Uddhava is asking questions just like in the Bhagavad Gita. And just like in the Bhagavad Gita, there were many sages who were listening while Krishna is speaking the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. Similarly here also, when Krishna is speaking the Uddhava Gita to Uddhava, we know that Markandeya Rishi, who is also listening to the teachings of Sri Krishna. And then Markandeya Rishi tells the same teachings that he has heard from Krishna himself. He imparts it to Vidura, like this. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains Arjuna his duties, what are his prescribed duties, and different, yogic and Vedic processes. Whereas in Uddhava Gita, Krishna is just talking about spirituality and just talking about, basic, everything is in the light of devotion to Krishna. So these are some, very, very important distinctions between the Bhagavad Gita and Uddhav Gita. One very final one is that the Bhagavad Gita is filled with the urgency, of the battle, while, just before the battle, Arjuna is like having a question of, life and death. And Bhagavad Gita was spoken in that time. And Uddhava Gita is taking place when Krishna is about to depart from the world. So Bhagavad Gita is spoken before the battle, Uddhava Gita after the battle, like that. So in this particular chapter, chapter 10 that we are going to, which is a continuation of the Uddhava Gita, this chapter we are going to, which is entitled The Nature of Fruitive Activity. This is chapter 10, entitled The Nature of Fruitive Activity. This chapter, Krishna refutes the philosophy of the followers of Jaimini and describes to Uddhava how the spirit soul bound within the material body can develop pure transcendental knowledge. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead said in text 1 that taking full shelter in me with the mind carefully fixed in devotional service of the Lord as spoken by me, one should live without personal desire and practice the social and occupational system called as Varnashrama. So we can see that, Krishna is talking about Varnashrama, but he is talking it up in the light of the Bhagavad Dharma. So in the previous chapters, Krishna described through the story of the Avadhut Brahmana that how we should take lessons from every walk of life practically. The practical means for achieving, a saintly position is talked about in the previous 2 chapters. In the Pancharatra and the other scriptures, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gives instructions for executing devotional service. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita also, in chapter 4, in text 13, Krishna says, Chatur Varnam Maya Shrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. That Krishna says that this Varnashram system I have myself established based on guna and karma, based on the nature and the activities. It's not based on birth. So I have personally created the Varnashram system. That's what Krishna says. So there are innumerable rules and regulations in the Varnashram system, and the devotee, Krishna is now going to teach Uddhava that how a devotee should execute those Varnashrama rules which do not contradict the process of devotional service. So Krishna is teaching the Daivi Varnashram system. So text 3, Krishna says, one who is sleeping may see many objects of sense gratification in a dream, but such pleasurable things are merely creations of the mind and are thus ultimately useless. Similarly, the living entity who is asleep to his spiritual identity also sees many sense objects. But these innumerable objects of temporary gratification are creations of the Lord's illusory potency and have no permanent existence. One who meditates upon them, impelled by the senses, uselessly engages his intelligence. So Krishna here, he's talking about a state of dream. That how in the state of dream we live in a false reality. This reminds me of a very beautiful story that there was once a king. And this king, he once had he had a dream. And after that dream, in the middle of the night, the king woke up and he called his ministers that, please come, I'm in a lot of confusion. So in the middle of the night, all the ministers, they came and they said, yes, my dear king, what is your confusion? How can we serve you? So the king said, you see, I just had a dream. They said, okay, what is your dream? The king said that in the dream, I dreamt that I am a butterfly. And as a butterfly, I am going from one flower to the other. I am going from one flower to the other, taking the nectar. And I dreamt that I was a butterfly. So the minister says, so what's wrong, my lord? It's a very beautiful dream, very auspicious that you are a butterfly. So what is wrong? It's such a happy dream. So then the king said, well, I have a doubt. My doubt is that am I the butterfly dreaming that I am the king? Or am I the king dreaming that I am the butterfly? So the minister said, oh, king, come on. It's obvious. You are the king and you are dreaming that you are a butterfly. That's what it is. And then the king said, no. My confusion is, what if this king, and all of you are actually a dream, that I am actually a butterfly, because as that butterfly, I was very happy, going from one flower to the other, and that seemed like reality to me. So who knows, what is the guarantee that this is not the dream as the king, and that actually I live a life like the butterfly? That is original and this is the dream. What is the guarantee? I am confused. So all the ministers, they were scratching their head. They didn't know what to answer, but there was a very wise minister, elderly minister. He said, my dear king, I have the answer to your question. He said, my dear king, you are neither the butterfly nor are you the king. You are actually a spirit soul who in the daytime dreams that you are the king, and in the nighttime you dream that you are the butterfly. That is the answer. That you are actually not this body. You're neither the king nor the butterfly. You are actually spirit soul. So that is the same point that Krishna is trying to explain here. That, dream, we tend to think that our life here in this world is all a reality. It seems so real. But there's a life beyond this, which is eternal. And we've completely forgotten about that. So then Krishna says in text 5 that one who has accepted me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the supreme goal of life, should strictly observe the scriptural injunctions forbidding sinful activities, and as far as possible should execute the injunctions prescribing minor regulative duties such as cleanliness. However, one should approach a bona fide spiritual master who is in full knowledge of me as I am, who is peaceful and who by spiritual elevation is not different from me. So here Krishna is talking that the way to get out of that illusion, the way to come out of the illusion of the dream reality, the only way is by spiritual practice. And that spiritual practice can actually be helpful, be meaningful to us only when we seek the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master who, Krishna says, who knows me as I am. And therefore, the self-realized soul, the spiritual master, can reveal me to you and therefore can bring you back to me. Krishna is establishing the importance of Guru here in this text 5 of this chapter. Very, very important verse. Then Krishna continues in text 6 that the servant or the disciple of the spiritual master should be free from false prestige, never considering himself to be the doer. You see, if the disciple, how can the disciple really learn something from the spiritual master? Only when they are being submissive. If we are very proud, if we are very egoistic, if we know that we know better than our teacher, we can never learn in such a situation. Never can we learn. So only when we are free from false prestige can we actually learn something from a superior person. So this is what Krishna is saying. He should be active, Krishna says, and never lazy. Spiritual life, Prabhupada said, that is a life of strict discipline. Waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning every single day without fail. Worshipping Krishna, chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, worshipping Tulasi Devi. These are all, the angas or the limbs of devotional service, limbs of bhakti. that Srila Prabhupada very meticulously has given to us, studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, studying the Vedic scriptures. Only then can we actually give up our material laziness and can become spiritually active. That is what Krishna is saying here. He should be endowed with feelings of loving friendship towards the spiritual master and should never become deviated or bewildered. That we must have loving relationship, loving reciprocation with the Guru. The servant or the disciple should always desire advancement in spiritual understanding and should not envy anyone and should always avoid useless conversation. Prajalpa. One should avoid useless conversation, one should not be envious, and one should always be subservient and always inquisitive to make spiritual advancement. We should not think, oh, now I got my Harinam Diksha. Done. Tick. I got a good guru. Tick. I got my Brahman Diksha also. Very good. Now I'm settled. Now I can never fall down. That never happens. If Bharat Maharaj can fall down from the stage of Bhava, which is at the stage just before Prema, the highest stage of Bhakti, what to speak of us? So therefore, Srila Prabhupada always said that spiritual life means walking on the sharp edge of a razor. If we slip our attention, if we become inattentive even for a moment, if we take spiritual life for granted, if we take the mercy of the devotees, if we take the mercy coming down from our spiritual master for granted, we will not even realize when we have fallen down, when we have cut ourselves very badly. So therefore, spiritual life, we must always be extremely mindful. Do not do it mindlessly. We should, never chant the Mahamantra just as a routine. Engage in devotional service just as a routine. Be mindful of what we are doing. Mindfully think of, what can I offer to Krishna today? What can I, how can I engage? What is the mission of my spiritual master? How can I assist my Guru in his mission to serve Srila Prabhupada? That should be the meditation. That should be the consciousness of a disciple. Krishna continues to say that therefore, by the cultivation of knowledge, one should approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead situated within oneself. By understanding the pure transcendental existence, one should gradually give up the false vision of the material world as an independent reality. That only when we have, Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuron Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. That only the spiritual master with the torch of knowledge can completely eradicate the darkness that is born out of illusion. That is the potency of the Guru, the mercy of the spiritual master. So therefore, by submissively hearing from the spiritual master, the expert disciple develops pure knowledge which repels the onslaught of material illusion which arise from the three modes of material nature, Krishna says. And finally, this pure knowledge itself will cease just as fire ceases when the stock of fuel has become consumed. So it is observed within the material world that sometimes even an intelligent person is not happy. Krishna is saying in text 18 that we see in the material world that even an intelligent person is not being happy. Similarly, sometimes even a great fool is very happy. The concept of becoming happy, Krishna says, through expertly performing material activities is simply a useless exhibition of false egoism, Krishna is saying in text 18. So Krishna says that just because we happen to be very intelligent, like the other day we were saying that just because we happen to possess all opulences, it does not guarantee that we will have a good night's sleep. Riches cannot buy us sleep. Similarly, intelligence with, that sort of an intelligent person is not really happy. Why? But sometimes we see that a foolish person who may not be even educated, such a person is very happy. Krishna is giving this analogy here in text 18, which reminds us of a very beautiful story, the story of Mahamurkha. You see, there was once a king, and the king in his court, in his assembly of ministers, the situations in the court would become sometimes very tense because they would discuss such grave problems would be discussed. Oh, this is not happening. Oh, this, such a criminal has come. What kind of punishment do we need to give? So the situations in the court would sometimes become very tensed. So one of the ministers, they suggested to the king that, my dear king, to ease out the situations in the court, let us appoint a court jester. He should be such a person that just by looking at him, everyone starts laughing and everyone starts smiling, so that, the tense situation in the courtroom is, kind of eased out. The king said, wow, it's an excellent suggestion. But where can we find such a person? So one of the ministers said, see, we cannot really just get an educated person to come and do this job, because, this person has to be just a person who is like in his own world, very foolish, very lazy, and just by looking at him, we just have to start, bursting out into laughter. That's the role of this person. So then the king said, all right, here's a solution I have. Let us do one thing. Let us announce that there'll be a huge feast, for the entire kingdom. And then the minister said, how is that going to help? He said, yeah, let the entire kingdom come. But the one who does not come, that is our court jester. So then the ministers did exactly that. And they really found that one lazy fellow was there who was not just interested in anything. So the ministers came to him and said, oh, we have a job for you. Oh, what job? Why this? He was like least interested. So they've dragged him to the king, and the king said, look, I'm giving you this staff. He was holding a staff, and you have to wear a crown, which says Murkha. It says fool. And all you have to do is just come to the assembly house every morning, and you will get a nice throne to sit. And, you just have to sit there. That's all you have to do, nothing else. So the court jester said, fine, yeah, you'll get this much salary, a nice place to stay and all that. So the court jester said, fine, I'll do this job, no problem. So every day, this Murkha would come wearing his Murkha crown and, fool written on his crown. He had a staff in his hand, and he would come and sit on that, court jester throne. And then everyone, as soon as he would come, the assembly house would, burst out into laughter. Everyone would become so joyful just by looking at this Murkha. So then one time, the course of time, everything was going on very well in the kingdom. But ultimately, one day it was time for the king to pass away. So the king was on his deathbed. And the king was calling all his ministers and giving them further responsibilities and explaining everything to them. And he suddenly remembered, oh, that court jester, the Murkha, he's there. So he said, go and bring Murkha to me. I have to explain to him also. So then, everyone, came and they brought Murkha, and the king said, so, my dear Murkha, you have done very nicely. So when you find the next Murkha who can, take your position, you hand over your staff and you put your crown to that person, and, you can get rid of your responsibilities in this way. So then the Murkha said, okay, that's fine. But my dear king, what has happened to you? Why are you lying down here on this bed? So the king said, well, I am dying. I'm, going away, I'm dying. So therefore I'm giving these responsibilities to all my ministers. And the king and this Murkha was saying, what, dying? What does dying mean? He was such a fool that he didn't even know what death was. So he said, what does death mean? So the king said, oh, now I have to explain to you in a fool man's dictionary. So I am just going on this long journey, the king said. So So Murkha nodded his head and he said, Acha, you're going on a very long journey, okay? So you're taking your soldiers with you? You're taking your big army with you? So the king said, no, I can't take my army with me. He said, okay, so you're taking, your, huge golden chariot and, your family, you have so many wives, so many sons and daughters, you're taking your family with you on this journey? So he said, no, I can't take anyone, I have to go alone on this journey. So Murkha said, Acha, you have to go alone. How about some riches? You're taking some gold coins with you, you will need that on your journey. Of course you will need that. So you're taking some, money from your treasury. He said, no, Murkha, I can't take any riches also with me on this journey. He said, Acha, how about something to eat? You're taking that with you? He said, no, I can't take anything with me. I just can't take anything with me. So then this Murkha said, Acha, you can't take anything with you. So where are you going? Fine, you're going on this journey alone. Where are you going? So that I don't know where I'm going. The king replied, I don't know where I'm going. He said, then why are you going? If you don't even know where you're going, why are you going? The king replied, well, I have to go. Everyone has to go on this journey. There is no option. We have to go on this journey. So then Murkha said, so you knew all your life that you have to go on this journey? The king said, yes, everyone knows. You only don't know. You are a Murkh, you don't know. But everybody knows we have to go on this journey. So then the Murkha, he just thought for some time. Then he removed his crown and he took his staff and he put it on the king. The king was lying down. He put it on the king's head. And then he said, I found my descendant. I found my, the one who's going to take my position. That is you. And the king and the ministers, everyone was shocked. What are you doing, Murkha? He said, yes, he is the greatest Murkha. He is the Mahamurkh. So the king said, what do you mean I am Mahamurkh? He said, look, you knew from the very beginning that you had to go on a journey in which you cannot take any riches with you. You cannot take your wives with you. You cannot take your children with you. You cannot take your army with you. You cannot take any opulence with you. Anything with you, you cannot take. All your life you spent, gathering so much of riches, you can't take anything with you. And you knew that you had to go on this journey, but you didn't bother to find out what is your destination, where are you going to go? So who is a greater fool than you, my dear king? So we may all be laughing at this story, but it is a fact of life, that sometimes we tend to neglect the most essential things in life. We have been awarded this human form of life. And this human form of life is meant for Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Then why have we come and taken birth as a human being? What are we going to? Why am I suffering in this world? What is going to be my next destination? Where am I going to go? What is my relationship with the Supreme? How am I, why am I suffering? I don't want to suffer. Why am I suffering? All these are questions that only a human being can ask. So that is what Krishna is saying here, that, intelligent versus fool. Who is actually happy? We need to see that. Then Krishna goes on to explain that if one performs Vedic sacrifices and fruitive rituals without any mistake or contamination, one will achieve a heavenly situation in the next life. But even this result, which is achieved by the performance of fruitive results, will be vanquished by time. Krishna is saying that yes, we may think that, okay, if we do some fruitive activities, good pious activities, that we will go and get promotion to the heavenly planets. But what happens? Krishna goes on to explain in text 23-24, saying that in 24, Krishna says that having achieved the heavenly planets, because of some pious credits, we achieved the heavenly planets. The performer of ritual sacrifices, they travel in, huge golden airplanes. being glorified by the Gandharvas. They are dressed in beautiful clothing. They enjoy a life which is surrounded by heavenly goddesses. But text 26, what does Krishna say? Krishna says in text 26, Tavatsa modate swarge yavat punyam samapyate kshine punya patatyarvag anichan kala chalitaha, which means until his pious results are used up, the performer of sacrifices enjoys in the heavenly planets. But as soon as the pious activities are done, he immediately falls down from the heavenly planets, being forced by the force of time, force of eternal time, Krishna says. So Krishna says that in the planetary systems, in any planetary systems in this material world, from the heavenly planets down to the hellish planets, and for the great demigods who live like 1,000 yuga cycles also, there is fear of me, Krishna says, in the form of time. Even Brahma, who possesses the supreme lifespan of 311 trillion 40 billion years, is also afraid of me, Krishna says. So this is the verse in text 30 of chapter 10 of 11th canto, where the exact age of Lord Brahma, the lifespan of Lord Brahma, is being given by Krishna himself. 311 trillion 40 billion years. But in spite of that, even Lord Brahma is fearful of Krishna. Because, why? Because Krishna is Kalosmi. You know, that he is the personification of time. That even Lord Brahma has to actually give up his post. So then, Uddhava asks a question. He says, "Oh my Lord Achyuta, the same living entity is sometimes described as eternally conditioned and at sometimes as eternally liberated. I am not able to understand the actual situation of the living entity. So my Lord, please explain. Can you please explain that how does such a, liberated living entity, how do they, enjoy life? How do they eat? How do they lie down? How do they sit? How do they move about?" With this question, this chapter ends. We see a similar question that was asked by Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita also to Krishna. When Krishna talks about a yogi, Arjuna asks, how does a yogi sit? How does a yogi walk? How does a yogi talk? What does he eat? How does he, regulate his breath? What does he do? So similarly, here, Uddhava is asking the same question, but not in terms of a yogi. He's asking the question that what are the symptoms of an eternally liberated soul? What is the difference between a Nitya Siddha and a Nitya Baddha? Eternally conditioned living entity and an eternally liberated living entity. So the next chapter, chapter 11, is entitled The Symptoms of Conditioned and Liberated Living Entities. So in this chapter, Lord Shri Krishna describes to Uddhava the difference between conditioned and liberated living entities and the characteristics of a saintly person and the different aspects of the practice of devotional service. So in the previous chapter, Uddhava had presented questions regarding conditioned and liberated souls. So in his reply, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, states that the spirit soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And on account of his infinitesimal nature of the living entity, of the Jiva Tattva, he falls into contact with the material energy, which causes him to accept the coverings of designations as the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So thus the soul has been bound up since time immemorial. Krishna explains that because of the fact that the living entities have revolted against, the power of Krishna, they've, become envious towards Krishna. And because of this envy, they wanted to enjoy separately from Krishna. And thus they have been brought down into this material world. Krishna explains that. And therefore they are getting influenced, based on their desire, they get influenced by the mixture of the three modes of material nature. And then Krishna continues to explain that, but when he achieves the shelter of pure devotional service, he becomes designated as eternally liberated. Transcendental knowledge is therefore the cause of the living entity's liberation, and ignorance is the cause of his bondage. So Krishna makes it very clear that the living entity is like the Tatastha Shakti, is the marginal energy. They can choose whether they can be in the internal potency of the Lord or they be influenced by the external potency of the Lord. They will have to be influenced by either of them. So they can choose. So by the power of transcendental knowledge, they can choose to be influenced by the internal potency of the Lord, by Yoga Maya, and therefore can have loving relationships, can develop loving relationships with Krishna. But in their forgetfulness, out of their false ego and their envy, and covered by the different layers of the modes of material nature, out of ignorance, they are, thrown down into the external energy of the Supreme Lord. So both knowledge and ignorance are produced by Krishna. The external, it's Maya, the illusion of Sri Krishna and his eternal potencies. The living entities who become attracted to the modes of nature are bewildered by false ego, which causes them to see themselves as the enjoyers, separate from Krishna. This is what material nature does to people. So therefore, they are, suffering with, little bit of happiness and more of misery. In material sense, Srila Prabhupada explains, what is happiness? The absence of misery is called as happiness. Like from a scale of, if you have a scale of happiness, if you go from -10 to -5, that is called as happiness in the material sense. But spiritual happiness is something which is on the positive scale. Going from -5 to -2 is not happiness. It is just a mitigation of misery. Like in the olden days, Prabhupada gave a very beautiful example. The kings would punish the criminals. How? By dunking them into the river. And when they're just going, almost short of breath, they would just pull them out. And they would go, they would breathe some fresh air. And as soon as that is done, immediately dunk them back in. So when they're brought up, it's like, this is happiness, this is relief. No, it's just the relief of misery is called as happiness in the mundane sense. So Krishna is explaining that there's a way that we can experience pure spiritual positive happiness. So then Krishna goes on to explain about the two birds, which the example is there from the Shvetashvara Upanishad in the Bhagavad Gita also, that there are two birds on the same tree. One of them is eating the fruit and the other is the witness, the Sakshi. So the one who is eating the fruit is the living entity and the one who is witnessing is the super soul. So like this, Krishna says in text 10 that an unintelligent person situated within the body by his previous fruitive activities thinks that I am the performer of action. So he is bewildered by false ego, and such a foolish person is bound by fruitive activities, which is stated the same thing Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 3, text 27, Prakrite kriya manani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimodhatma kartaham iti manyate. That, because they're bewildered by the false pride, they think they are kartaham iti manyate, that they are the doer of all kinds of activities. But Krishna says that an enlightened person who is fixed in detachment engages his body in lying down, sitting, walking, bathing, seeing, touching, smelling, eating, hearing, and so on, but is never entangled by such activities. Indeed, remaining as a witness to all bodily functions, he merely engages his bodily senses with their objects and does not become entangled like an unintelligent person. So Krishna is saying, answering to Uddhava's question, that how does he sit, how does he talk, what does he do? So Krishna is saying that, it's not that a liberated soul does not eat, does not sleep. No, he does everything. Just the external activities may appear to be on the same level as an eternally conditioned living entity. But an eternally liberated soul, he does everything in connection to Krishna. He sleeps so that he can wake up and serve Krishna in a better way, in a much more enthusiastic way. So in this way, this is how Krishna explains that externally the activity may be same, but the consciousness of the person who is in an eternally liberated state is what differs between the two. This is what Krishna says. That, that's why Srila Prabhupada very beautifully named our organization International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It's not Krishna activities. That it doesn't really matter what activities we are doing, but rather we are actually sitting, and when we are engaging our thought in the service of Krishna, that is Krishna consciousness. Externally, we may be working. Externally, we may be doing so many things. This reminds me of a very beautiful joke. In our early days of Krishna consciousness, there was this beautiful joke book called as the Goloka joke book. And there was this one story of a new Bhakta Fred, who had joined a temple. And this Bhakta Fred, of course, it's a, disclaimer is there's no such person, but it's a joke, yeah? So just for namesake, we are giving this person the name Bhakta Fred. So Bhakta Fred, he joined the temple, and then the temple commander, brought him up to the speed with the temple activities, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then, attending Mangal Arti, chanting Japa, and then 8 o'clock listening to Srimad Bhagavatam class. All the new bhaktas were expected to do this entire morning program. So Bhakta Fred used to do that, and then one day at the Bhagavatam class, the temple commander could not find Bhakta Fred. So then the temple commander went to the brahmachari ashram, and he flung open the room to Bhakta Fred's, room, and he said, "Oh, Bhakta Fred is not here too. Where did he go?" So then Bhakta Fred was, getting searched, all over the temple grounds. And then the temple commander was shouting, "Bhakta Fred, where are you? Where are you?" And then suddenly near the Goshala, on a haystack, very nicely, Bhakta Fred was lying down on the haystack, and he was basking in the sunlight, getting nice morning sun on him. So then the temple commander said, "Bhakta Fred, what are you doing here? You are supposed to be in the temple room, listening to Srimad Bhagavatam. What are you doing here in this haystack? What are you doing?" So then Bhakta Fred got down and he said, "Oh, Prabhuji, I was thinking that it would be better for me if I sit here in the haystack and think about the Bhagavatam class rather than sitting in the Bhagavatam class and thinking about this haystack." So, we should not be like Bhakta Fred, of course. We must attend Srimad Bhagavatam classes. But the main point being said is that what is our consciousness when we are doing certain activities? We may be chanting our japa, but while we are chanting our japa, are we really, focusing our mind on listening to each and every syllable of the Mahamantra? Are we attentively hearing Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare? Are we listening to each and every syllable of the Mahamantra? Or is our mind traveling elsewhere? We should be very careful that what activity, Krishna conscious activity we are doing, service we are doing, that we are staying focused. Our mind, body, intelligence, everything focused on the service that we are doing. Then that service is pleasing to Sri Guru and Krishna. That service is accepted by Guru and Krishna. And that performing such service gives great pleasure to us, because that is the purpose of the fulfillment of our service. So then Krishna goes on to explain in text 20 that, "My dear Uddhava, an intelligent person should never take to literatures that do not contain descriptions of my activities, which purify the entire universe. Indeed, I create, maintain, and annihilate the entire material manifestation. Among all my pastime incarnations, the most beloved are Krishna and Balaram's pastimes. any so-called knowledge that does not recognize these activities of mine is simply barren and is not acceptable to those who are actually intelligent. So Krishna here, he's saying that any other literature that does not directly describe the transcendental activities of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even, Srila Jiva Goswami explains as a purport to this particular verse, he says that even the Leela avatars of the Lord, such as, Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, Vamana, all of these Leela avatars of the Lord, they are also, very not that dear to the Lord. Krishna's pastimes, they, we can see what difference is, like about Kurmadev or about Nrsimhadev. We spent maximum, a few chapters talking about the glories of Nrsimhadev, talking about Lord Ramachandra. But Krishna, we spent 90 chapters. 4 volumes of 10th canto is talking about Krishna. From his childhood, we don't see Nrsimhadev and his Bala Leela. There's no Bala Leela of the other incarnations. No childhood pastimes. But Krishna's pastimes are unique. They are so unique. Of course, Lord Nrsimhadev, I'll tell a very beautiful pastime, that one time, one very senior Prabhupada disciple, His Grace Mukunda Datta Prabhu, he asked me this question that Lord Nrsimhadev, he is the protector of all the devotees. That's what Srila Prabhupada said. And, but why in Mayapur, we see that Ugrasthanu Nrsimhadev, he is wearing tiger claw pendant. The tiger claw pendant? He's wearing not one, but he wears 3 of them. And we know that Mother Jashoda used to put the tiger claw pendant to Krishna because it is meant for protecting Krishna. Because so many demons would come to attack Krishna, so Mother Jashoda, to protect Kanha, she would, put this pendant of the tiger claw. So Mukundadatta Prabhu once asked me that, please, can you tell me why? Why does Nrsimhadev, who is supposed to be the protector, that why is he wearing not 1, not 2, but 3? 3 tiger claw pendants. And I asked this question to Jananivas Prabhu. And Jananivas Prabhu just smiled and he said that, well, Lord Nrsimhadev is no doubt that he is the protector. But devotees, they feel so much of, love towards Lord Nrsimhadev that he also is the protector. But, the devotees also feel very protective out of their love for Lord Nrsimhadev. So in their Vatsalya love, in their love for Lord Nrsimhadev, they say that, my dear Lord, you are protecting everyone, but may our love also protect you. So that is the mood with which Lord Nrsimhadev is offered these pendant of tiger claw. It's such a sweet thing. And when I told this to Mukundadatta Prabhu, he said, wow, this is possible only in Sri Mayapur Dham with such beautiful devotees as Jananivas Prabhu and Pankajangri Prabhu serving their lordship. So nonetheless, Krishna is saying that my pastimes, Krishna's, super excellent pastimes, any scriptures that is not describing the super excellent pastimes of Krishna directly is a scripture worthy not to read. So even Lord Brahma, in his Brahma Samhita, he also talks about the same point. In the Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, text 39, Lord Brahma speaks, Rama Adimurti Shukala Niyamena Tishtan Nanavataram Akarot Bhuvaneshu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pumanyo Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami, Tamaham Bhajami. Lord Brahma says that I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna, the primeval Lord. Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pumanyo. So Krishna is the fountainhead. He is directly the primeval Lord Govinda. and his different avatars, such as Rama, Nrsimha, Vamana, etc., are his subjective portions. So even the Vedic scriptures, which neglect the Supreme Personality of Godhead, should be ignored. And this fact was actually explained by Narad Muni to Vyasadeva, who was the author of the Vedanta Sutras. And this was the reason that Narad Muni explained to Vyasadeva that this is why you are not feeling contented, Vyasadeva, because you've not directly described the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his glorious devotees. So thus instructing him to write the Srimad Bhagavatam. So coming to the conclusion of all knowledge, one should give up the false conception of material variety that imposes upon the spirit soul and thus seizes one's material existence, Krishna says. And thus the mind should be fixed on me, Krishna says. So Krishna says the same instruction in the Bhagavad Gita too, in 18th chapter. Krishna says, Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyaschashmi tattvataha tato mam tattvato gyatva vishate tadanantaram. That one can understand the Supreme Personality as he is only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord, only then can one enter into the kingdom of God. Direct, understanding of Krishna. So text 25, a very, very important verse of this chapter. Krishna says, Satsanga labdhaya bhaktya mai mam sa upasita savai me darshitam sadbhir agyasha vindate padam. One who has obtained pure devotional service by association with my devotees always engage in worshipping me. Thus he very easily goes to my abode, which is revealed by my pure devotees. So Krishna says, I don't reveal my abode to anyone. That is another very beautiful point Krishna is saying, that I don't talk about my own abode, but my devotees. Who is that devotee? That is Krishna himself as his own devotee, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is again another hidden meaning of this verse, which is, giving a hint on the appearance of Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu, that Krishna is saying that I don't talk about my own abode. But there will be a personality who will come soon, who will talk about my abode, and that is Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu. So then Uddhava questions that, my dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, what type of person do you consider to be a true devotee? And what type of devotional service is approved by great devotee as worthy of being offered to your Lordship? Please tell me this. So then Krishna says, Krishna gives, from verses 29 of this chapter till verse 31, Krishna describes the 28 qualities of a saintly person. Uddhava asked that who is a saintly person? Who is a true devotee? And verse 32 explains the highest perfection of life. What Uddhava asked. So first we'll read text 32, which Krishna says that such a saintly person must be considered the most learned of men. Which saintly person? One who possesses the 28 qualities that Krishna described from text 29 to 31. So he perfectly understands that the ordinary religious duties prescribed by me in various Vedic scriptures possesses favorable qualities that purify the performer. And he knows that neglect of such duties is a discrepancy in one's life. Having taken complete shelter at my lotus feet, a saintly person ultimately renounces such ordinary religious duties and worships me alone. He is thus considered to be the best amongst all living entities. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the 17th quality that Krishna describes, which is Matsharana, which is like taking complete shelter of Sri Krishna, is the most important of the 28 qualities that Krishna talks about. Because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that once one takes complete shelter of the Supreme Lord, and in fact, more specifically of the representative, of the bona fide representative of the Supreme Lord, who is the spiritual master, then the other qualities automatically manifest in such a person. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana sarver gunes tatra samasate suraha. As is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that, that one who seeks shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his bona fide servants, sarver gunes tatra samasate sura, that all the, beautiful transcendental attributes, the transcendental qualities are automatically manifested in such a person. So let's quickly try to see what the 28 qualities are. The first one is kripalu, that a devotee cannot tolerate, the seeing of the suffering of the living entities. Therefore, he always is busy and engaged, always in distributing Krishna to others. Akrita droha is the second one, which means that even if someone is offensive toward a devotee does not become offensive in return. Third is titikshava. A devotee forgives and forgets any offenses against himself. Devotee never takes offense done to himself. Fourth, satyasara. A devotee always remembers that he is eternally the Supreme Lord's servitor. Anavadyatma is the fifth one. A devotee knows that the material world is a temporary phantasmagoria and therefore does not envy anyone in the material situation. He does not try to criticize others unnecessarily. Sixth, sama. A devotee remains steady and equal in material happiness, distress, fame, or infamy. Sarva upakaraka means one who is always benefiting, always working for the benefit of others. Just working for the benefit of others without any envy, without any returns, without expecting anything in return. Kamer ahatadhi is the eighth one, which is undisturbed by material desires. Ninth is danta. A devotee is naturally repelled by sinful activities. 10th is mridu, that because a devotee has taken shelter, he does not consider anyone to be his enemy and is not disturbed by the tendency to enjoy separately from Krishna. Therefore, they are very, mridu means gentle. They are very sublime, very gentle. 11th is shuchi, that they are very, they're free from even the tendency to commit sinful activities. That is called as shuchi. Akinchana. 12th is akinchana. A devotee is free from possessiveness and is not eager to enjoy or renounce anything because he considers everything to be Krishna's property. Aniha is the 13th quality. A devotee never acts on his own behalf, but rather as a service to Krishna. 14th, mitabhuk, which means a devotee accepts material sense objects as far as necessary only, just to keep himself healthy in the service of Guru and Krishna. Shanta is the 15th one. A devotee remains always peaceful. Sthira, 16th. That remembering Krishna, the devotee does not become fearful of any situation. They do not become impatient. Sthira means not to become impatient, being very patient. 17th, this is the quality that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur talks about, is mat sharana. A devotee does not take pleasure in anything other than serving Krishna and his bona fide representative. And the devotee has complete faith that avashya rakshibe Krishna e vishwas. That devotee knows that Krishna will protect him under any situation. That is called mat sharana. 18th, muni. That a devotee is very thoughtful. They engage in thoughtful process for, engaging in spiritual practices. 19th, apramatta. A devotee remains sane by offering his activities to Krishna. Gabhiratma is the 20th quality, that a devotee merges into the ocean of Krishna consciousness by his own consciousness becoming deeper and deeper, becoming very Gabhiratma, means they're very deep. 21. Dhritiman. By controlling the urges of the tongue and the genitals, the devotee remains steady and patient and does not impulsively change his position. They don't act impulsively. They're dhritiman. Jita Shadguna is the 22nd quality. By spiritual knowledge, a devotee is able to conquer the pushings of hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, old age, and death. Amani is 23rd. A devotee is not puffed up. They are just always ready to offer respect to others. And they are not attached to their own fame. 24th is Manada. A devotee offers all respect to others but expects none in return. 25th is Kalya. A devotee is expert in making people understand the truth of Krishna consciousness. That's called Kalya. 26th, Maitra. A devotee does not cheat anyone by encouraging them in the bodily concept of life, but rather the devotee becomes a true friend to everyone by giving Krishna selflessly to others. So they're friends of everyone. Karunika is the 27th quality. A devotee tries to make people sane, and therefore they are paradukha-dukhi. That they experience the misery that others are facing, and they become unhappy seeing the misery of others. They are very merciful to others. Karunika. 28th is Kavi. A devotee is expert in the revealed scriptures, the knowledge of the revealed scriptures. So one who engages in Krishna's service and understands him as the limitless, Lord, is actually the topmost devotee, Krishna says. The practice of devotional service includes 64 different kinds of activities. Krishna, concludes this chapter by talking about deity worship. Among these, how to worship the deity, by, seeing, touching, worshipping, serving, glorifying, and offering obeisances to the deity of the Lord and his pure devotees, by developing attachment to chanting of the Lord's qualities, pastimes, Lord's, going on narrating the Lord's, developing attachment to the leelas of the Lord, remaining always in meditation upon the Lord, offering everything one acquires to the Lord, accepting oneself to be the servant of the Lord, offering the Lord one's heart and soul, engaging in the glorification of the Lord's birth and his activities, observing holidays in relation to the Lord, observing festivals in the Lord's temples in the company of other devotees, celebrating, the yearly functions which are connected to the Lord. Like next week we have Janmashtami, we have Srila Prabhupada Avirbhav Tithi. So we have an array of festivals coming up. So like this, Krishna is saying that, he says that even humbly cleaning the temple of the Lord, rendering service to the Lord's home is also, Gundicha Marjanam, is the best way to serve the Supreme Lord. So like this, Krishna talks about how we can engage in direct deity worship. So Krishna concludes in text 48 of this chapter. Krishna says that, my dear Uddhava, I am personally the ultimate shelter and the way of life for saintly liberated persons, and thus if one does not engage in my loving devotional service, which is made possible by associating with my devotees, then for all practical purposes one possesses no effective means for escaping from material existence. So this is where we conclude our session today. We thank all of you for your patient hearing and for your online association. So before we conclude our session today, we will share with all of you the quiz session for today. But before that, we would also like to thank all of our devotees who are watching online with us. And we are very thankful to all of you for the beautiful comments that you all made. So we thank you so very much. So today's quiz questions, we have 10 questions. First, how many chapters and verses are there in the Sri Uddhava Gita? Second, what is the basic difference between Bhagavad Gita and Uddhava Gita? Third, was it the king dreaming that he was the butterfly, or was the butterfly dreaming it was the king? Fourth, why did the Mahamurkha give his staff to the king? Fifth, what is the lifespan of Brahma? Sixth, what is the cause of the living entity's liberation and the cause of its bondage? Seventh, why does Lord Nrsingadev in Sri Mayapur Dham wear tiger claw pendant? Eighth, how does Krishna hint about Lord Chaitanya in the Uddhava Gita? Ninth, what are the 28 qualities of a devotee? 10th, how many kinds of devotional service are described by Krishna? So these are the 10 quiz questions. We look forward to hearing from you back again, and we will again meet all of you tomorrow with our 90th session of the Sri Bhagavatamrita. Thank you all so very much. If you have any questions, please let us know. But otherwise, we look forward to seeing all of you again tomorrow. Thank you all so much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Can you repeat the 9th one? Okay. The 9th question I've been asked to repeat by Keshavi. The 9th question is, what are the 28 qualities of a devotee? So thank you all so very much. We really thank all of our live listeners, Facebook live listeners, and the listeners who will be listening to our session on YouTube, because all of these videos that we are doing will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. So please, we request all of you to please like the channel, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Please spread it amongst your friends and relatives so we can keep serving all of you. Thank you all so very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. ISKCON Vartaman Guru Vrinda ki jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Sitanath Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Thank you all so much. Hare Krishna.